Welcome to the Law Firm Growth Podcast, where we share the latest tips, tactics, and strategies for scaling your practice from the top experts in the world of growing law firms. Are you ready to take your practice to the next level? Let's get started.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Case Fuel podcast. I'm your host as always, Jan Roos, and we are here today with a very interesting episode. So I'm here with Judie Saunders, who is the owner of Judie Saunders Law over in New York and New Jersey. And in addition to having a really interesting story, she'd originally reached out because she's a listener of the podcast. So it was really, really great to connect with her a little bit. And now here we are on a podcast. So I'm really excited to have it. So thanks for coming on, Judie.
Thank you for having me. Love your show.
Awesome. Yeah. So basically, and well, you know the drill more than a lot of people, we always like to kind of set up with a story. So can you tell us a little bit about how you got to where you are with running the practice today?
Sure. So I feel as if my practice, my story resembles what's going on right now with this horrible pandemic. If I give myself a quick answer to that, I am a relauncher. So I started my practice, or I went out on my own after spending some time in politics and policy. I had worked for a time with Mayor Michael Bloomberg. And then just before that, I had worked as a litigator or a prosecutor in the Brooklyn District Attorney's Office. And then I decided, wow, it would really be interesting, really be fun if I opened up a law practice, started a family, and moved. So that didn't go so well. So what happened is that over the next couple of years, my practice really constricted or got smaller, and I spent more time raising a family. I have two boys. So in the end of 2018, really in earnest in 2019, is when I relaunched my practice, opened the doors, super excited. And really the main difference of going out the first time, opening the doors the first time in this relaunch, was an understanding that I needed to focus, do a huge deep dive into understanding finance, understanding how to run a business, not how to lawyer. So that's kind of, where I started in 2019, understanding the balance sheets, profit and loss, watching the money, watching the dimes, understanding how to do that, understanding marketing, and all of those things that I didn't have before. So that's kind of where I am right now, and just using tools and resources like your podcast and some of the great guests you had on there to really make a go of this business and enjoying that process.
Yeah, that's awesome. I would say for the first part, on any given Sunday, we have a lot of people that might find themselves in a similar situation where maybe, hey, going around as a solo and not being in the same position that they expected to be. But I'll say in this particular situation, if you weren't in that, coming out on the other end of this pandemic, it's probably more than likely there's going to be a lot of people looking to do a relaunch when things end up getting, a little bit back to normal, regardless of where you are in the country, right?
Right.
So let me ask you this: as far as like the motivation behind the relaunch, was there any sort of a come to Jesus moment where you sort of said, okay, this is basically it, this is enough, and this is like why I want to relaunch the practice?
So I'd have to say there wasn't any one come to Jesus. It was honestly a constant low-lying pull. It was always there. It was always an energy like, this is going to happen, when's the right time? And I'd have to say that I always accepted. So over that time that I was mostly home and raising the kids, I was still accepting some cases, still doing, trying to do trials to keep up on my litigation skills, doing the CLE, the continuing education courses. So there was always that pull, always that low-lying, this is going to happen, I'm going to do this, I want to do this, love the area, love the field. So, and then finally, I'd have to say that if I could pinpoint one type of event, it would have to be, and this is a kind of a just random story. I was working out, I was at the gym and ran into a friend, Linda Lottenberg, and she was mentioning to me a fellowship that she was running, or a fellowship that she had heard of. It was called Inspiring Capital. And what it turned out to be was this really, really great cohort of 15 women from different backgrounds, finance, communications, marketing. And the purpose of the fellowship, which I applied for and was accepted, it was to look at business and business with a purpose. If you're going to be coming back, after a career break of however long, a year, 5 years, 10 years, why not come back with purpose, with a business mindset, and be really mindful and conscientious? So I'd have to say that if there was anyone come to Jesus, it was probably a come to Jesus in the gym and speaking to that friend.
And then that's actually sounds like such a great opportunity too. So, I mean, I don't know, not everyone has a cohort of 15 people that they can have to help relaunch a business, but that sounds like a really fantastic opportunity. So let's actually dive into that a little bit more. So basically we have, you're in the position where you've kind of made the first decision to move forward, which is always the most important step. How did things kind of start off for you? And then what ended up changing first as far as what you're doing with the practice?
So I'd have to say, and anyone that is thinking of relaunching, even after this pandemic, I don't necessarily believe in or espouse, having a mentor, maybe because I don't think that I ever really had one specific mentor, but I would say that it is so important to find a partner, someone to bounce ideas off of. So how it started in the first place, it was me setting that, and I mean this word, it used to be just, I know it's used all the time, me setting a boundary. Before it was always either, doing work in a co-working space or only working in, when the family hours permitted. But it was really kind of setting up and establishing hard boundaries. I'm back to work. The office is open during this time. No, I can't pick you up, to my kids, or no, I can't take you surfing. I have two very avid surfers. It was really setting those hard boundaries, signing a lease on an office and going to the office and really reminding myself of that hard work, that I had done, as a prosecutor or done when I worked in politics, going back to those type of hours, setting up those boundaries and starting to say no, to some other, things that weren't a priority. So that's kind of how it started off. And then I really think that I picked up momentum with this cohort. Linda Lottenberg and Judie, her partner, they moved away from that cohort and they started a company called Evolve Me, which is they do beautiful work as far as if you are a relauncher or if you're someone in a pivot or in a career, or even in these times, they really do beautiful work of bringing you in, giving you that circle to bounce ideas off of, helping you understand business. We did some work around understanding technologies, which was really fun to see, come home and I would asking my boys, well, have you heard of this app and that app? And it was really fun that they hadn't, and to know that I had kind of gotten that exposure beforehand. So I think that's really instrumental, that when you are doing some type of relaunch, some type of pivot, if you can find someone, and there are groups out there, to just even to hear, I'm thinking about offering this service or doing that really helped. That really helped me get momentum on this relaunch.
Yeah, and I think that's such an important thing too, because you kind of see this happening all the time. And whether it's, somebody relaunching a business or somebody getting back to the gym after a long layoff or who knows what, right? I think the ability to get that momentum is such an important thing, because when sometimes people will go through and they'll put their nose to the grindstone. But I mean, definitely kudos to you, Judie, for first of all, making, I think it's really important to set yourself with those distinctions. So the stuff like getting the office, right? Like you're signaling to yourself by virtue of where you're going to be, how serious you are to being committed to this. And then once you start getting the results, you're almost building power around this idea of this really being a new thing in your practice. So if anyone's listening to this, keep that in mind. If you might have tried and not had the best results from this, definitely take take the splitting of these things seriously and making sure that you're having those quick wins in the beginning. So wanted to touch pivot a little bit. So one of the things you mentioned is that you're kind of diving for the first time into like these numbers and these more traditional business aspects versus the traditional law ones. So were you surprised to find anything with how your practice had been running? And, what did you change from that perspective?
I would say it is nothing like I was doing before. I realized that I had a real fear around, it was the fear of the unknown. Before you're kind of just plugging along, you're kind of bootstrapping it and not really digging into these principles that I instinctively knew that you needed. But because I wasn't trained, you'll hear it 1,000 times. We're not trained to do that in law school. You're not trained to do that. You say, okay, I'm going to open a law practice, and you think somehow magically, the back office is going to run itself. But it was really just, and if I can use your term from earlier, having a come to Jesus moment and saying, what is scaring you? What is terrifying you? Just do it. So when I did that, I had also been working on a board at a local health clinic that offers free health services. And they had a gentleman on there, one of my board members that I work with, and he had spent his life in business and finance. And that was kind of my first starting point, just approaching him. Can you just tell me the issues? I put him in my scenario, if you're opening the doors to a new business, what are some of the foundational documents that I need? And this now also goes hand in hand with some of my own research that I was doing, looking around, reading books. I started to read ferociously and I shouldn't say read because I'm a podcast listener and an audiobook. So audiobook listening, nonstop to every business book, Profit First, anything I could get my hands on. So that kind of was really the second thing, just opening back the curtains and the doors that scared me and looking into the finance, setting up the balance sheet, setting up the profit and loss, looking at what are the profit margins, what numbers I need to hit, all of those things that I didn't do before. That's probably the biggest difference to what's going on now.
Okay. And it's also like super evident that, you're definitely a voracious learner, Judie. So I kind of wanted to dig into that a little bit. Like, as far as like how, there's a lot of information out there, and I have to say it's definitely of varying quality. So as far as like how you ended up, getting those recommendations for the first books, I guess, a meta question is, how do you go about prioritizing what information you wanted to get in your practice at a given time? And then secondly, if you had any, books that you thought were super helpful, like what could you recommend to somebody who's in this position that they're considering a relaunch like you were?
Sure. So, I think that what I did is that I said to myself, Judie, I started to talk to friends that I knew that had MBAs. And I had even flirted with the idea of maybe I need to do some type of, should I go back to school with this relaunch? Should I do an MBA online program to really get that kind of foundational finance? And the resounding answer was no, you do not need an MBA. So then what I did is that I started to look at the curriculum of traditional MBA programs. And then I also went online and looked at them being offered in your professional studies. So for individuals that have advanced degrees or just wanted to go back or add to their careers, I started kind of reading that course curriculum, reading those outlines as a cue to me as to, and especially the programs that had professional study curriculum, I started to really read those course outlines. And that kind of gave me some buzzwords that I know that I needed. So I started with that. I did find the book Profit First very helpful. I think the other book, and I'll have to confirm, was I think it was a 3-day MBA or 7-day MBA. I forget the exact title. That's another one that I jumped in, and it kind of, and then I started listening to Seth Godin. It kind of just expanded from there. So I started with what I thought would be kind of the concrete fundamental, and then I kind of expanded from there. And that, it led me to this. And then the other thing I started to, and also you'll get suggestions, your Audible search or your, and that's how it led me to other books. But I kind of knew going back to those areas that I had no idea, but knew you needed that. So I kind of would just search those topics, so for example, profit and loss, profit margins. I kind of started to do searches into those areas.
Yeah, that's super thorough. I don't know if I've ever heard about somebody taking that same strategy, but like going all the way directly to the source material. That's really good. And as far as people, if to play the devil's advocate to the people who might not want to take the time. I mean, you obviously have a really busy life, Judie. You got your 2 sons, you've got the practice that you've been not only running but growing aggressively in the past year and a half. I mean, what kind of time investment are you putting into really learning all this stuff? And where are you finding the time in your day to do that?
I'll have to be fully transparent with everyone. There's not going to be, we all know that it's a myth of the perfect work-life balance. I think that what has worked for me and what I think would work for most individuals is really, I'd have to say, my pro hack has been the audible listening. So if I'm on the train, because I commute before this whole pandemic, I was commuting, say, 3 days a week into the city to court appearances. And I use that time to listen to the books on the train, no matter what I was doing. If I'm listening to a podcast or a YouTube video, I'm digesting. I think that was the key, to digest a large bulk of this material by doing it in an audio form, so that I could keep working or keep moving, or if I'm driving, I was nonstop doing that. I think that's kind of how I did it. And then now I really relied on some of the old tactics that I use. So for example, law school, you're going to pull all-nighters. You're going to put, the family, finish cooking or whatever it is that you're doing. And then it's the second shift. I mean, we all know the second shift. It's re-employing that. That's how it works, right? That's how I'm making it work. Just using that same laser focus that got me other things that I wanted in life and applying it to this relaunch.
Yeah. And like, I'd also say probably it's like, it was a little bit more aggressive on them. Hopefully you're not pulling too many all-nighters these days. So I think it's like, the more you have to change, the more energy you need to kind of break the pattern.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So let's switch topics a little bit. So we've talked about kind of the financial stuff, but from the marketing side, what kind of changes did you start putting in place, and how did that end up like working for you?
So the marketing side is the one thing that I have been actually from the beginning kind of laser focused on. I realized that I no longer wanted to exist in the feast or famine, waiting for the client, or waiting for the random referral. So what I'm doing right now is I'm actually trying to implement a more global strategy, a way to look at marketing and always asking myself the question, well, why am I doing that? Why am I going to send that out? Or who's going to be interested in that? Or is someone really, really going to take something from this? Again, we all are time crunched. And my goal is to not put out a piece of content out there that it's not going to just make you just a smidgen wiser or make you a little bit more curious. So that's kind of my intent and purpose. And then it's working with a consultant to try to help me craft, messages that are on point, with email marketing. And that's the one thing that I'm focusing on right now. I love LinkedIn for all of its different resources that it has. But a lot of thinking about the content, thinking about the email marketing, thinking how to best serve my audience. Those are kind of the things that I'm thinking about with the marketing piece.
Gotcha. I know you mentioned earlier that you were a fan of Seth Godin, and also a huge fan over here, by the way. So,
Yeah.
Having that, I also think too, I feel like there's been this issue with a lot of the stuff. I think it was just this kind of, end of the last decade, mostly. It was just like when, Twitter and Facebook were cool and you could just get a lot of results from just posting stuff every day. I think people kind of got into a pattern where they were just churning out content for the sake of having something to keep the algorithm happy. And people kind of lost sight of what actually was providing value. But beyond kind of like having like an angle that ends up benefiting someone, just to get like super tactical, what are you doing to build your email list right now?
So it's funny, today I just posted on my wall asking myself the question, where are my people living? Where are my clients living? What are they reading? I'm trying to really dig down and get to that person that needs to hear my message. And I think that I do that tactically by continuing to ask myself that question, because even today I thought of 2 other areas that I hadn't even looked at before. Part of my practice focuses on, the abuse of individuals by either authority figures or institutions. And I started to think to myself, well, where are these people? Where are they? What are they reading? What are they doing? And how could my service help them? So I always try to make myself expand my mind and not just go to, where I would normally think, go to a trade association or, go to send out a post. I'm always just trying to ask myself, stretch my mind and think, where is that one person that could be helped by this? So I think that's kind of tactically how I try to approach the whole marketing. I've also been thinking about doing some really targeted writing and blogging. I've done some, but I think that that's an area that I know that can serve, but really, really, really asking myself those questions as I'm writing. So that's what I'm constantly doing when I'm putting out content and marketing.
Right. And it's also, yeah, I can kind of tell too. So we were looking at your website a little bit before we ended up jumping on this call, and I clicked on the resources tab, and I saw actually such a really interesting thing. Like you put together like a little bit of a resource package as far as stuff that was pertaining to the crisis. So I both wanted to say that's really super interesting, and ask you about that specifically. But in the more general sense, how's everything been affecting you with the pandemic so far, and what kind of stuff have you been doing to just get through this?
So one of the benefits, of course, of being a solo or a small business is having the ability, having the agility to do a pivot. And one of the things that I like to do, and one of my skills, is getting in, reading, pulling out, looking at legislation, understanding that. That was one of the things that I did in one of my prior jobs. So as soon as I started, and this is something that I just do in my spare time, listening to policy, seeing what's going on congressionally. So as soon as I started to, hear about the families first, the different phases of the CARES Act, I started to say to myself, well, how could this, help the business? How could it help colleagues? The immediate impact that it's had on my business is that, of course, there's no traveling, there's no going to courts. So everything has gone online. You're watching, you're seeing, how this is affecting clients, but also, other small businesses. So I started to say to myself, even to colleagues that, are fellow attorneys, reading the CARES Act, is putting out, well, this is what I'm seeing going on with the disaster relief funding. This is my experience. It's looking for one thing that I like to do was try to find those phone numbers that someone will actually pick up. So it's just sending out a post like, guys, you have a question about the SBA loans. This is who you should contact, or this is how I'm reading it. This is how I'm construing it. And that was kind of the impetus and the reason for kind of putting out those resources. Like, what can I do if I can't get into court, if I'm not able to meet with children or with individuals in relation to my advocacy work or, the civil litigation, what can I do as a business owner? So that's kind of how that's where I saw that I could use my skills immediately. And so that's what I did.
Yeah, I think it's such an elegant skill set too. I mean, like for anyone who's listening, it's like, you don't necessarily have to have a background in legislation to be able to do what Judie did. It's about really kind of catering to what you can offer. And again, it's like with the stuff that I've been seeing doing the best in this whole kind of pandemic. It's like, all right, yeah, we know you take Zoom meetings. We know you got the banner on the front of the site. That's kind of table stakes at this point. It's going that extra step to do what Judie did and actually kind of leverage something that's unique in a first way, and that's actually going to leave people with value that ends up being, what actually kind of ends up driving success in the long term. And then one of the last thing too. So just I know we've mentioned a couple times, but the kind of civil litigation part of your practice, and the fact that you're a certified B Corp, which is something that's very, very rare to find in the law firm world. So could you tell us a little bit more about that, like, and kind of, how that whole thing works, and then, what sort of, changes that you have to make your law firm to do that?
Sure. So the process, one of the things to talk about, so I will try to be brief with becoming a certified B Corp. And it was a part of that whole process that grew out of learning the business side and how to run a business. And it also, then it came to me, well, what type of business do you want to be? What do you want to say to your clients, to people looking from the outside? And I started to research, the different certifications. And also as part of the fellowship, that's kind of where I first was introduced to B Corps. Now, of course, B Corps have been around for decades. So some of the more well-known are Ben and Jerry's, the retailer Patagonia, Eileen Fisher. They're kind of the trailblazers. And the value of being a B Corp is that you're saying to the world, you're saying to customers, you're saying to your hiring, to your team, we value you. We value the local community. We value the environment. We value the global community. The process was vigorous. And it's something that I'm glad that I went through early on in the relaunch. So from a service side, it's turning over financials. It's answering questions on your impact on the environment. Are you implementing safety? If you have hiring, how do you treat them? What does your employee handbook say? It's actually changing your governing documents. So the process was great, but the motivation to do it was that being a certified B Corp so aligned with what I believe as a person, and a business owner. It was almost, it was a no-brainer for me to join and to say, they often give the analogy that being a certified B Corp is analogous when someone has not heard of that. If you were to pick up, say, a bag of coffee and you see a fair trade on it, it immediately signals to you, the consumer, that this product, from the ground to the store, to the supplier, to the farm, everyone is treated fairly. And that's what I wanted to say to the world in this new business. That not only you as the client, but my team members, associates, everyone is considered. The impact that we have on our environment, that's also considered. We're not just churning out or doing things. So I know that a lot of times it's in the industry, or any industry, in any business, you'll say to your clients, we care about you, we're responsive. No, I wanted to go one step beyond and let people know, as a certified B Corp, not only am I responsive to you as a client, but I care about the community that I sit in and I work in. I have an office, office closer to home in New Jersey, so I care about, and I'm active in that community. I'm also very active when in boards that I sit on in New York City. So that's kind of what the whole B Corp says.
Yeah. And another kind of follow-on question for anyone who might be considering this, like, you've now had the opportunity to have a more traditional law firm and then actually gone through the entire process to have a B Corp. What would you say is the major difference as far as, being on both sides of that? What's changed the most for the business?
It's being, well, one thing that's changed is you really start to think of yourself as a business. You're laying down the foundations to be a business. It's not just running a practice. It's not just, hurriedly running to court, churning out, not really thinking about the business side. You're really setting up these principles to run yourself as a business. And then also you're putting on that extra layer. And that this is a difference. So I think about, where, and you need to do this in the certification process, where are you even getting your office supplies from? How are you disposing of, your waste as part of the office? Even in the office that I'm in, what type of standards, the lighting they use, all of those things that I wouldn't have considered before are now part of the way that I run the office, the way I run the practice.
Yeah. All right. That's super interesting. And then for anyone who's considering that, I mean, this is getting a little bit, it's been super, super helpful thanks for coming on, Judie. But for anyone who might want to have any questions, I hope I'm not opening the floodgates here.
No.
But what would be the best way for anyone to find out more about you or get in touch?
Absolutely. They can email me at Judie, Judie, at jsaunderslawfirm.com. And I have no problem with my phone 917-674-7753. I love to help. This is how I've done my relaunch, by getting help from others. So I am here, and I'm ready to help anyone else.
Okay, thank you so much for that. I mean, it's a super generous offer. And again, like I said, I hope it doesn't open the floodgates. But if anyone wants to go ahead and reach out to Judie about anything, and this has been a really interesting and far-ranging conversation, but be free to reach out. Yeah, thanks again, Judie. Super appreciate you reaching out, and it's been awesome to have you on the podcast.
Thank you. It's been great speaking with you.
All right, thanks for everybody. And then we'll have another episode of the Law Firm Growth Podcast for you next week.
Thank you for listening to the Law Firm Growth Podcast. For show notes, free resources, and more, head on over to casefuel.com/podcast. Looking forward to catching up on the next episode.